Hey, Observant listeners, the Ultimatum. Let's see what happens.
Since the engagement, he's talking about baby fever. To me, that's wild because on our dates, like he was talking about babies like crazy. Mm-hmm. You know, like we joked about having like 12 kids. You know, so we were talking about that stuff.
No, we had talked about all of that before, but it's a difference of talking about it and being like, this is happening.
Why? What was the purpose of Roxanne saying those things? What is the motivation? I don't understand. And the wisdom around it and the fact that it just doesn't even faze Kat. She's like, oh yeah, I get that. And Kat just confidently stays in her zone. She doesn't get defensive or aggressive with her. But if you're what is the purpose? Oh, that's interesting that you think you've been together for how long, according to my notes? Kat and Alex, you've been together for 3 years now. And isn't that cute that now he wants to have kids with you? Well, with me, he was constantly talking about having kids. What are you saying, Roxanne? That in the 3 weeks that you were together, Alex wanted to be with Roxanne more than you and wanted to have kids with Roxanne right away? And that's what you believe to be true? And you're still hostile towards Kat for some unknown reason? I bet you that Roxanne is still 100% convinced that Alex is a psychopath. There'd be no reason for her to change her mind on that because there's been no extra data. And so Roxanne must be thinking, oh, well, you know him, he lies all the time. He talked about kids with me and he's talking about kids with you, but you know, he lies. So he's just saying that. I bet you that's where she's coming from, which, you know, I'll give if I was to take a guess, I'd say there's like a 10, 15% chance that Roxanne is somewhat accurate about that personality assessment. I don't know, but there's more of a likelihood that she just misunderstood Alex. But I don't know.
And like, I'm ready for this like right now versus...
You know, we get to go do that.
Yeah, versus a joke of, let's have 12 kids, you know, yeah. That's very different. Because we did have those conversations.
So we know while Kat likes...
It is notable that all 5 couples are together planning on getting, well, except for Roxanne but in relation, Roxanne and Antonio seem to be progressing more solid as a couple, which is interesting. I would not have predicted. I certainly was not. I mean, but do we really think Roxanne actually agreed to get? I mean, she's literally saying now she doesn't want to marry him. She's not saying I don't want to marry him now. And maybe she was saying that at some point in the future, maybe. But I mean, I wouldn't put my money on it. Well, I don't know. Hard to say what she's going to do. But anyway, at least 4 out of the 5 couples are seriously engaged and seemingly together stronger. But, you know, you never know. Like, there's an incentive and encouragement to come on the reunion and seem like everything's fine when everything is not fine, you know? Like, I remember the reunion with, was it Jarrett and, what was her name? And from Love is Blind season 3, I think. And turns out they were not going through good times and they got divorced sometime after the reunion, I think, if I remember right. So, you know, who knows what, as I said in the beginning, it's like, it's not very hard. Well, it's a lot easier to manage to stay together after a year from the show than to stay together for 5 years or 10 years or something. So, you know, who knows where things will be in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, specifically Antonio. So I didn't know when I gave my strong opinion that you were like, oh, like he wants my girl. That was not the intent. It was no ill intent there. It was just like, hey, I want you to know this. I feel like I owe it to you. So sorry I didn't think of that and like make it clear like, hey.
Okay, good. Yeah. Should he be apologizing for anything else? Yeah, I would think that he could do well by saying some of the things that I said to you, Roxanne, were, you know, from the inside saying them, they seemed much different. So watching them in terms of the edit, I come across much more dickish and arrogant than I care to see. So I didn't realize that's how I was coming across. I was trying to say this, that. And honestly, I could almost imagine him saying something like that. Well, no, because Roxanne did apologize to him, seemingly genuinely. And then he was like, yep. Now, and I hypothesized about this at the time, given what we learned later about how much Roxanne hates Alex and they're living together and how comfortable I think Roxanne is with conflict, there's a chance that some pretty serious hostility was going between the two of them, and that there is no possible way he was going to drum up any kind of goodwill or apology, even if it's in his mind he's like, it'd look good for the cameras if I did it, but I just can't do it. She is such a horrible person, or whatever. It didn't look that way to me, but anyway, that's good. Good that he's saying that. It seems like Antonio is receiving it. I wonder what Antonio thinks after watching that whole thing. I wonder what he has to say upon watching it.
This is crazy.
It was pretty intense.
I do think there's a lot of things that you could have elaborated on more as you were speaking. I think that was kind of shown whenever you met Kat's friends. But overall, I don't think you have a bad intention at all.
Trey, I want to just go off of the friend thing, just because you brought that up real quick.
Okay, that's interesting. So I trust Trey. He seems like a stand-up guy and a good head on his shoulders, and has a lot more contact with Alex. And because I really wonder about Alex. There's a wide range of possibilities, but that was what I was kind of leaning towards. And as well said, it's like, you could have elaborated a little bit more. You say these short things, and it's easy to misinterpret if you don't elaborate. And I say this all the time and think it all the time. And I think it's also because I'm such a blabbermouth that whenever I am in a situation where there's conflict, I will probably go overboard with providing caveats and explanations and making sure that I'm fully explaining myself so that there's less likelihood of misunderstanding what I'm saying. Annoyingly so, I'm sure. So I'm oriented that way. But so many people will, as a way of, out of anxiety or lack of knowing how to say it, will just go, boop, they just say this little thing. There's a vast sea of an idea and of an experience and intention that the person is coming from, and then they just put a little, drop of water as a boop. As a representative of this giant ocean, here is one drop of water, and it's so easy to misunderstand that. If you give a little bit more, it's much more likely that you'll be understood. And he was doing that. He would just go, I didn't know if he just was so aloof and so arrogant that he didn't care to elaborate. It's just like, blah, blah. But it's also possible that there's some kind of reservedness and anxiousness or lack of awareness of something. I don't know. It's hard to figure out what's going on with him. Like with James, even before he revealed his traumas, it was pretty clear that it was something. It was easier for me to hypothesize. With Alex, I can't. There's also just a possibility that Alex is just a really mellow dude without a lot of issues. There's no reason to believe he has a tremendous amount of issues. He's just a super mellow dude who's kind of quiet, maybe a little introverted, and easily misunderstood. That's a possibility.
Quick.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, the night Kat and I spoke at Girls' Night, I felt like that was what I was trying to tell her.
Let's take a look.
Oh, never seen. So, oh boy, this is like the cuties moment. Oh my God, I'm worried. I'm worried for Roxanne because, I suppose if the editors really wanted to out someone, and given how much Roxanne talks, if they really wanted to kind of a shocking moment, they would highlight Roxanne's hypocrisy. Because remember, what was she accusing Alex of? She was yelling at Alex in a way that wasn't very convincing, saying that he's a bad person for telling Antonio about his opinion about how much Roxanne cared about him, right? And saying that's wrong, you should never do that, when literally an hour earlier, she is talking 10 times the amount of crap to Kat about Alex. You know, she's doing the exact thing that she's saying that it should never be done. Now, of course, what Roxanne would say is, well, Alex was saying wrong stuff to Antonio, whereas I was saying right stuff to Kat. But anyway, so well, I worry for Roxanne here.
Did it ever make you sad to hear that Alex questions you, though? I don't know him at all like you do, but he's not a genuine person, and it has like broken my heart almost to feel like you are with someone like Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost verbatim what Alex was saying to Antonio. Very similar vibe there. Yeah.
Kind of feeling like this isn't from a good intent, so I don't want to talk about it.
You watched it. He was very unsure.
Oh, well, that wasn't much of footage. I thought there'd be more, or I thought they would review where she really goes off. I mean, there was that scene that we did see where, and I'm guessing they all saw that scene. I get the impression they did watch it, or a truncated version or something. Okay, yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, I keep looking for evidence that Kat is a Xander. So who was the other person from last season? You had Xander and Ray. So Ray was passive in a pathological way, in a way that was all-encompassing, you know, Lexi and Ray. And Ray was passive and would talk about how she has a really hard time asserting herself and allows other people to walk on her. She's a people pleaser. So there's not much of a limit to the amount that she will, that Ray will accommodate, right? Whereas with Xander was also very nice and not, you know, drama oriented, and would be very accommodating to people. But there was a limit, and when that limit happened, Xander would assert themselves. With Kat, I was wondering, is she a Ray or a Xander? Because you don't know. Maybe in the beginning she looked like a Ray, right? Because we didn't see any pushback on anything. But then there was that moment. But I was like, it's hard to know. I mean, maybe she's just really uncomfortable in front of cameras, or just not very drama oriented, or she's just really nice, you know? And she doesn't get triggered very often, but she does have a limit, because everyone has some sort of limit, and she's not afraid to assert that. And, you know, it's almost like a really healthy approach, right? It's like, well, you know, for the most part, I can give people the benefit of the doubt, but you cross the line, and I'm going to nicely assert myself. And so the moment when I was like, oh, I think she might be a Xander, was when Antonio was talking to Roxanne about Alex, and Antonio is saying, you know, that piece of crap, or that ball of crap, or whatever, sack of shit, I think he was saying. And instantly, Kat was like, do not call Alex a sack. He's not a sack of shit, or whatever. And it was even less hostile to that. It was certain, and it was sure, and it was firm, but it wasn't desperate or anxious or hostile. It was just like, don't do that. You can't call him. Don't call him that. And I thought, oh, she's a Xander. Maybe. It's good to see. And then in that footage, we see again that Roxanne is starting to lay in to Alex, and Kat is, well, let's rewind that, because I think we can follow in Kat's footsteps.
He's not a genuine person, and it has like broken my heart almost to feel like you are with someone like Alex.
I'm kind of feeling like this isn't from a good intent, so I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. It's like kind of feeling, you know, she's not lying, and she's not avoiding, like, I have to go to the bathroom. She's being honest, and she says, kind of feel like this isn't coming from a good intent, and I don't want to talk. I can't even be as firm as she is. You know, there's a tone of voice that she has where it's very certain and firm and assertive and without hostility, without sarcasm. I don't know if I could do that. Even as I role play it, there's a feeling of sarcasm and hostility or too certain or something. I can't do what she does. It's really perfect because it is, you know, asserting her needs, but it also is much less likely to trigger some kind of response from other people. They're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, we should all aspire to have that ability to just, you know, you're nice. And she's like, oh, okay, I hear you, that's what you're saying. In her head, she's like, I don't agree, but okay, I hear you, I hear you. And then, it's edited. So at some point, Kat says, I feel like this doesn't have good intent, and so I would like to not talk about it anymore. Good for her.
You watched it. He was very unsure about you. That's why I was like, why? Why does he want to be with you? I was just asking. He said it himself through the whole season. And that's fine.
The amount of a lack of awareness and projection that's happening. I mean, and maybe she's aware of that. I could see that. But so I wonder if that's what it is. I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, object relations. I've been talking about how it's possible that she has a split, and not like a split personality, but we all have a tendency for splitting, particularly when we're younger. But without going down that rabbit hole, I've talked before about the hypothesis, and I don't know if this applies to Roxanne, but I have treated people with this where they have this split in think of them as different modes of their personality, and their sort of cruising speed mode that we see a lot in Roxanne is this mode of like, I'm independent, I don't care, I'm business oriented, I'm better than that, I don't need people, and I don't want to get married, and downplaying everything and not responding to I love you, and she's full. When she's in that mode, it's almost like a different version of herself, not split personality, but it has a lot of associations and a lot of interpretations and everything. Another part of her, which is present at all times, but just less access to it, is a child, an inner child that is very vulnerable, very scared, very unsure of herself, and desperate for attachment, security, and cannot let go of Antonio. Or when push comes to shove, she wants to run back to Antonio because Antonio is her safe blanket. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it can result in a lot of chaos. But so these two modes, and the vulnerable mode only shows up when there's a threat, when Antonio is talking about breaking up, or when they do break up and she starts to date other people, and the inner child of hers, that mode of hers, it doesn't connect with maybe the other men that she dates, and so that compels her to go back. Whereas the cruising speed, main mode, or the outward mode of hers, is like reluctantly going back to Antonio, and that's what we see. And a furtherance of this model is that you can say that these are two warring, conflicting parts of her internally that are overcompensating. So because she feels vulnerable deep down, she feels weak, she feels unsafe and fragile, there's another part of her that was developed a long time ago that attacks that part of herself and says, like, you're pathetic, like, no, and there's a lot of evidence of this. I don't know, but among the tiny bits of data that the show actually provides, there's a number of things. Most notably, when she was talking about with her mom, or maybe it was with Alex's parents about. Well, I think it was with her mom. Roxanne's talking to her mom, and she's talking about how she's like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to think about settling down and getting married because, I don't want to turn into one of those women that I'm constantly making fun of. She says this. And that's what projection is. People use projection in a different way, but what I'm talking about right now is actual psychoanalytic projection, where there's a part of her that she hates, someone that is dependent and fragile and needy and human and sacrificial maybe, and attached and reached out. And when she sees any evidence of that in other women, she projects that part of herself into them and attacks it, because really the conflict is internal. And she's mostly unaware that deep down at her core, she has this vulnerable part of herself, because she's in denial of it, because it was very inconvenient for her. It was very frustrating to her that she did have that part of humanity when she was younger. And so that's why that mode that we see is so extreme and so marked, because it seems like she doesn't have a heart at all. And it seems confusing. It's why are you with him then? Because there's this other part of her that definitely not only wants to be, but needs to be with Antonio and knows that, right? So we see the part of her that's trying to get out of the door, but the bigger part of her is actually inside the door, keeping her tethered to this man, And so then she projects into other people, and she's kind of obsessed, right? And she seems kind of obsessed with them, because they might represent both parts of her. Alex represents that arrogant mode. It'd be very easy for her to project that onto him. And Kat represents the inner child, the vulnerable, fragile, unassertive, part of herself, or at least has enough qualities. And this couple, and that might have been why she was sort of attracted to, because, the main mode that she identifies with in cruising speed is the person who rejects and eschews attachment and neediness, which Alex kind of looks like, right? So she's like, well, maybe if I'm with someone like me, but it's not like most of her, but so she goes after Alex. So that's why maybe she was initially compelled by them, because Roxanne seems particularly focused and obsessed. Similar to how Lexi and Ray, how Lexi was so obsessed with Vanessa and Xander, right? And something's going on there. Who knows? Maybe not, but possible. So. With Kat, she is saying, he doesn't like you. He's a psychopath, and what she's really expressing or struggling with. So the cruising speed part of her that is independent, pathologically independent, and arrogant and dismissive hates the vulnerable side of her, like I said earlier. But the vulnerable side of her hates the arrogant side of her. They both hate each other. They both despise each other. So she has reasons to hate both of these people, because a part of her hates the Alex in her and a part of her hates the Kat in her. And then when she's in the presence of them, it becomes manifest. That's a lot of psychobabble, but it is my psychobabble. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really, really do.